Hello and welcome to this webinar. Please say hello in the chat box. Today we are joined by Nick Telson. I am sure that if you're not familiar with him, you're familiar with his platforms. If you tried to book a restaurant, make a reservation for tonight or in the past weeks, you'll have come across DesignMyNight, which he co-founded. So in today's webinar, we're going to explore Nick's entrepreneurial journey, hear about investing, the startup ecosystem, and how he built his business venture. So before we go into it, we're going to start with a question. And I think this is a really great question for lots of entrepreneurs, and it's one of the ones I find the most interesting. So Nick, what was that earliest entrepreneurial endeavor? What was the thing that got you started?
Actually, when I was at secondary school, we did it was two of us that did like a football magazine, and it was called Football Fanatics, and we used to just sell it at lunchtime. And yeah, I think we sold it for like £1 around the school. And we actually worked with like lots of football clubs in the end that were giving us like free prizes for raffles.
I think this wasn't just like a small scale magazine.
Well, it was, but we convinced these football clubs to like give us like signed T-shirts and shirts and balls, etc. For raffles, but then the money we made for it, we donated to sort of local hospices around the school in North London. So yeah, I think that was probably the first go at being an entrepreneur.
It's interesting to hear that, because I think that's a lot of our sort of tycoon businesses. So the businesses that we fund in that kind of school age category, they start with really similar things. It's magazines. It's kind of projects that are linked into their communities, and they act quite like a social enterprise. So giving back to their communities with their profits. And were you getting into trouble with this at school? Was it encouraged? Did you feel that the entrepreneurial spark was cultivated, or were you seen as a bit of a troublemaker? A hustler in the playground?
We had to get we obviously had to get sign off before like selling it at school, and then we did have to get sign off before every edition. So we had to like get it proofed by one of the teachers, I can't remember who. So they like approved everything before it went live. I don't think it was ever encouraged. I think that for me, that's the biggest pitfall in schooling at the moment is, we're not really taught about business and entrepreneurship. Like you can do business courses and a business degree eventually, but that's very different from like entrepreneurial business and sort of having the flair just to go and do it yourself. So I think that's definitely like one of the huge pitfalls of our schooling system at the moment.
I agree. I think lots of times entrepreneurship is not seen as a career path. You sort of are familiar with entrepreneurs, a handful of them, but you're not ever told that that's a way for you to go. And if you felt like that, like how did it influence the path that you followed? After school, what did you end up doing? Where did you go to?
So yeah, I just followed like the classic path. So did my A levels. We were actually the first A2. We were the first year that it changed. Did my A2s. Went to university. Did languages. So I did Spanish and Portuguese. Again, nothing to do with business. At Nottingham University. Loved it. Great fun. I think uni. Again, I'm a big believer now that you don't necessarily have to go to university to be successful, 100%. For me, it was more of a growing up moment. So, I sort of found who I was. It was the first time, you're free from parents and, your friends that you've made at school just to go and be who you want to be at university, somewhere different. So uni for me was great as like a growing up tool. I knew I didn't really want to use my languages as a job, like a teacher or a translator, but I love languages and it's something I'm good at, where I'm not very good at everything else, but I was very good at languages. So I was like, I'll do languages. And then, I followed like the career path. So got a 2-1 at Nottingham and then went to L'Oreal. So I joined their grad scheme to do marketing. And back in the day, there was like 5 or 6 big grad schemes to do in marketing. So you had like Procter Gamble, L'Oreal, Orange, the phone network,
Unilever,
and other ones like that. So luckily I got onto the L'Oreal one, where they actually said I had the worst maths test they've ever seen, but the best marketing tests. So they were really in a conundrum whether to put me on the grad scheme or not. So luckily, I convinced them that I can use Excel, but I'm just very bad at maths in my head. And yeah, it was at L'Oreal for about 4.5 years doing marketing. It was great. Got to launch a couple of brands into the UK. L'Oreal, people will know all the beauty products you see, but it's essentially a marketing company. It's just only so many different ways you can market shampoo or whatever. So they just got to come up with new gimmicks every so often. So it was really good fun. And then, after L'Oreal is when I decided to do DesignMyNight. So I started my journey until 25 on the corporate ladder, but then around 25 decided to jump ship.
And were you still sort of at university and in your sort of time at L'Oreal, were you still being entrepreneurial? Did that still feel like it was bubbling under the surface or an option, or were you just sort of trying to be entrepreneurial in your job?
Yeah, so trying to be very entrepreneurial in my job, which is quite difficult at a big corporate. But at L'Oreal, we have small teams. So I sort of tried, when you were talking about a troublemaker at school, I tried to be that at the corporate. So I tried to break things, okay, well, this is how we've always done it. Let's try it this way, which doesn't always go down well in a corporate. But yeah, so I was always trying to do that. And then who I started DesignMyNight with was my best friend who I met at uni. So we actually met week 1 at university. And we'd always discussed, maybe one day we'll set up a business together, but we had no idea what. And when we came up with the idea for DesignMyNight, again, we weren't sort of brainstorming ideas to leave our jobs. DesignMyNight, the idea just sort of came to us when we're in New York. And then we decided, okay, well, we've always wanted to do this together. Let's do it. So it sort of happened by chance rather than us thinking, let's start a business and come up with an idea.
And I think loads of us have those conversations. It's a dinner party conversation. It's a conversation with friends. It's like, how are you going to become a billionaire? It's like, this is what I'm going to do. You're always having those conversations, but so few people actually go and do it because it feels intimidating. So I think most people will be familiar with DesignMyNight. As I say, if you have tried to book anywhere recently at all, you'd have come across it. So if you could just give a sort of brief overview, what is DesignMyNight?
So DesignMyNight in today's form is a sort of, we call it a discovery platform for going out. It's in 20 cities in the UK. So bars, restaurants, pubs, clubs. So you can go on, find based on the type of night or day now you want to have. It will then give you lots of options. So pretty much like a timeout, which most people will know as well. But then sort of our secret sauce was the software behind it. So we also sold and developed restaurant and bar booking software. So software that the bars and restaurants use to manage their own bookings. We did ticket software. So any event organizer could use our platform to sell their own tickets. And then we also did a vouchering platform. So if you want to buy a gift voucher at a restaurant for a friend, they'd be using our software. So we sort of had 3 bits of software behind the scenes that we developed in-house and sold. So we had when I sold the business, we had about 15,000 software customers across the UK. And obviously that all plugged in nicely to our DesignMyNight brand. So when you were booking a bar on DesignMyNight, we had live availability because they were using our software to manage their own seats. So we could see live availability. So that then made DesignMyNight more attractive for a user because, we had all the availability, we had the tickets, we had the booking, so you could do it all basically.
And was it, based out of kind of stress that you found yourself? Because actually not that long ago, I'd say less than 10 years ago, you'd say go on to Time Out or go on to a sort of an internet site, have a look through all the recommendations, and then go on their websites, call them up, and then that's how you went out. You had to go and do a lot of sort of exploring to find who would take you. So was that as something that you found in your own life? Were you in New York looking for bars and be like, where can we go?
Yeah, well, especially London. So I'm from London, born and bred. So I've always known, especially in the bar scene. So we started in the bar scene. So now you're used to just picking up your phone, booking a bar or restaurant, done within a minute. But as you said, back in 2009, 2010, especially in the bar scene, which was our core start focus, To book into a bar, you would have to phone them, but there'd be no one there till like 6 p.m. When you did phone them, it was the manager running around filling up ice buckets and dealing with a customer, and you didn't think they would have your booking. So that was like the first pain point was, okay, it's happened for the restaurant industry with the likes of Open Table. Why hasn't it happened with the bar industry, and what can we do to fix that? And that was sort of our first pain point that we focused on, was bars. And it turned out to be the software that we built for them.
Yeah. And you had the idea, what were the practical things that to sort of turn it into a fully fledged business? Were you still at L'Oreal and this was your sort of passion project, or did you just say, I'm taking the jump?
So the original idea didn't have software. So the original idea was just and it sounds really stupid now, but like a digital first discovery platform. So timeout was really bad, especially on mobile. Again, this was 10 years ago. And there was no platform that was thinking for, 20-year-olds who by then were using mobile phones for everything. I know it sounds crazy now. So we were like, okay, well, the simplistic version is let's do a timeout, but much better digitally. So we found an agency to build it. We did a deal with them that they would keep being our agency as we grew if they gave us a really good deal. Yeah. So they gave us like a really, really cheap deal to build the first website of DesignMyNight, which I've got screenshots of, and it's awful when I look at it now. I can't believe we thought that was great. And we did that for a year while at our jobs. Yeah. So we met every weekend, Saturday, Sunday. We met probably about 3 or 4 evenings a week after our work, doing the website, planning the website. Most importantly, just going around chatting to bars and pubs. Like people forget to do that. Like go and speak to your customer.
I know.
And every weekend, it sounds great, but we weren't drinking in them. Like literally picking an area and going into every bar, every pub, asking to speak to the manager, seeing what they like about timeout, what they didn't, what they'd want from our platform. We did that for a year. I left L'Oreal December 2010, which was about 3 months after we launched the website. Andrew, my co-founder, was at Accenture. So he stayed for 6 months. We split his salary for 6 months. And then he left as well 6 months later. So then we were both full-time, probably about 8 months after we launched the website.
And how were you those early days, how were you funding it? Were you bootstrapping? Was it sort of based on, your savings, friends and family, sort of investment?
Yeah, so no friends and family investment, unfortunately. It was bootstrapping, so as I said, like we were walking around with a piece of paper, not even an iPad, asking bar owners what they thought of the idea. The money that we had to spend was obviously building the website, and that was like Andrew and I saving for like a year. So we knew the bill was coming. So we both, didn't go out for a year, didn't go to restaurants, didn't go to bars, and literally saved our salary for a year. And Andrew was earning better than I was. And that was what went into building the software. And then we bootstrapped it. So the money we made, even though it was small, was going back into the business the whole time. We had like interns. We didn't have a team. We had like 3 or 4 amazing interns, some who I still speak to today, that work with us. And then we raised funding about 1.5 years into the journey, 2 years. So we bootstrapped for a really long time, which is like very rare nowadays. People just want to raise money straight away. So that probably slowed us down in the grand scheme of things, but that was fundamental to us understanding where the business was going to go.
And then essentially be in a better position to actually go out and be quite selective when you were getting funding.
Yeah, we could say, look, we've built this platform on nothing. We've got this amount of traction. We've got this amount of bars interested using us and paying us. So yeah, if you speak to an investor, they're like, okay, that's impressive. Mm-hmm. And you guys obviously have something. And I think as I'm an investor now, and when you're looking at founders, that's what you're looking for, is like, does that founder have that special something? And it's not a degree and it's not intelligence. It's just, do they have that something that they are gonna get out of bed every morning and just graft and do everything they can to make this business work. And I think our investors saw that with us.
Yeah, a real hunger.
Yeah.
And, you know, you obviously made this into a highly successful multi-million-pound venture and then exited. Was that always your plan? And do you think that being on those quite commercial grad schemes, sort of respectively at L'Oreal and Accenture, helped you understand what that journey could look like better?
I think being at the big companies, and fortunately I worked my way up. So, you know, I ended up managing P&Ls, so profit and loss sheets. And, you know, as I said, L'Oreal owns like 60 brands you wouldn't even realize. So, you know, I worked on a brand that probably no one's ever heard of, but, you know, was a 30 million pound business in the UK. And I was managing that P&L and, you know, what we were spending, you know, what were our profits, all of that. So that gave me a really good base of just what a business sheet, let's call it, should look like and how to run a business. It's obviously very different. You know, you've got marketing budgets at L'Oreal and you big brand behind you, but it gave us a good grounding in business for sure. I wouldn't necessarily say it helped us on the entrepreneurial journey. Yeah, it definitely gave us that grounding in business that neither of us had before, which was really important.
And did you set out with the expectation that you were going to build something, exit, and sort of make a multi-million-pound, highly disruptive company?
When we started, I don't think we thought, you know, we want to be super disruptive. We want to be a multi-million-pound business. I think you all dreamed that. So, you know, I think we both knew that's what we wanted. It wasn't until we sort of raised funding that Andrew and I actually sat down and were like, okay, what do we want from this? And again, very rare. We actually just sat down and very honest with each other. You know, it wasn't a passion project. You know, we don't love bars. We don't love putting people into bars. We love going to bars, but it's not something, you know, we weren't saving the environment, for example. You know, it's not something we were like, we want to do this for the rest of our life. So we had a very frank discussion about money, which is a very dirty word for some reason, but something you need to discuss. And we said, okay, if we exit this business in 5 years, let's say, which was when we spoke to our investors, that was sort of a time frame they were interested in. What would we be happy putting in our own back pocket? What would be a success? And we were very near on that figure, luckily. Which I won't say what that figure is. But then what we did is work back from that. So we very strategically said, I'm going to make up numbers here. Let's say we want 10 million pounds each in our back pocket when we finish this. We knew that software companies sell for about 12 times their profit. Yeah. So we were like, okay, well, we own, let's say, again, this is made up. Let's say we own 30% each. So if we want to put 10 million pounds in our back pocket, you know, we need to sell this business for 40 million pounds. And to do that, if it's 12 times profit, we need to be making, you know, 3 million pound profit in 5 years. So we literally charted that out, revenue, profit over 5 years, what was realistic, and literally charted that graph until exit, when we then decided to sell the business. So it's quite unheard of. You hear all these magical stories of people Google coming knocking and offering you tons of money just because you're great. You know, that's very, very rare.
And it sounds like you had the plan. You were actually very happy with, you know, how things turned out. Where I know a lot of people go into investments and they don't quite realize that naturally means giving away a bit of the control of your company, and they're not ready to lose that control. And then, you know, the company is being grown to exit. How did you sort of build that into your strategy? Was it just going with the right investors, having that frank conversation early on?
It's a good question, because I think people nowadays, founders I see, they come out of the gate straight away, want to raise money without any real revenues or profits. Now, if you're going to do that, you're going to have a much lower valuation. So you're going to have to give away an early chunk of your equity. And then you need to plan how much more money you think you're going to need to raise. So if you need to do 3 more rounds of funding to get your business to be profitable, let's say, you can roughly work out with some mentors or advisors, okay, it might be worth this then, it might be worth this then, it might be worth this then. So if we raise this much money, I'll be left with 5%.
Yeah.
Whereas Andrew and I were very clear that we wanted to keep control of the board and equity. So we had to always be over 51% combined. So we were in control of the business. So to do that, we didn't raise a lot of money. So we only ever raised, it sounds flippant saying not a lot. So we only ever raised £500,000. And then were very careful with how we spent our money, grew it very organically. And then exited only having raised £500,000, where, a lot of people that got our amount of exit might have raised 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 million pounds. So the founders would have had a lot less equity. So we were very strategic on that too.
And do you feel that you and Andrew were perfect co-founders? Lots of people get on well with their co-founders, go into business together, and then things sort of take a turn for the worst. Why were you sort of a good match?
Yeah, you've got to be super careful picking a co-founder. I think firstly, I don't think I could have done it by myself. So I think having a co-founder was really, really important for me. They say don't go into business with friends and family. I think Andrew and I, just our friendship was all, we were just always very open with each other, respected each other. I think that has to be the number one key, is that as co-founders, you have to let each other go off and make decisions. That's why you have a co-founder. So, you have to trust their opinion to go off and make decisions without putting everything through you. And they need to trust your opinion as well. So we both trusted each other's knowledge and skill to do that. We also had very different skill sets. So I was very much sales, marketing. Andrew was very much sort of finance, dev, sort of business operations type thing. And we actually split the business like that. So, I managed that side of the business, Andrew managed the other side of the business, and we would come together in meetings to discuss how everything was going rather than micromanaging each other. So I think founders fall apart when things start to go wrong, and then there's blame culture, there's whodunit. And if you're going to run a company like that, then it will never be successful. So picking someone is very, very important.
And that sort of leads me into the next question. It's like in culture, in the culture of a company. And if you have the two people at the top, but the co-founders are at each other's throats, there's sort of too many egos involved. Obviously, the culture is going to be quite difficult. So what made DesignMyNight a company that people wanted to work for and use, and that investors wanted to invest in?
Culture was number one for us. So we were always clear, from day one, that we wanted to look after the team. Again, that sounds obvious now, mental health of your employees and physical health, and treating them well. And now you've got remote working with COVID, should be a given now, but it really wasn't back then. But we sort of really wanted to make the team understand that we genuinely care about not only their well-being, but their growth. So we hired a lot of young people at DesignMyNight, some who it was their first job. But they said, look, I want to start a career in customer success or account management or whatever. And we were like, great, if you have that hunger, we will take the time and grow you, build you. All of our managers, when I left, started in a junior role and had grown up into the team. Like my customer success manager, she joined us when she was 22. When I left, she was 27 and managing a team of 15. And she'd had no managerial experience up until then. So the team knew that we were there to really look after them. There's obviously, we were very lucky with the perks. So DesignMyNight, they were getting invited to press events and group, they were all going out a lot, which was great. We didn't have to pay for that either. And we encouraged that because, you could then, go out. We would go out with them as well. So we were very present founders. We sat on a bank of 4 with other people. We didn't have an office somewhere else. They would go out a lot as a team. We would go out a lot as a team. And it was just like a family. It sounds cliche, but a lot of people looked at Andrew and I as like their older brother. And, we genuinely cared for them. Another important thing was giving staff share options. So we had an option pool. which for anyone listening that doesn't know what that is, was we basically put aside shares in the business that we would hand out to the team. So, if you were a very important senior figure in the team that might have taken a pay cut to join DesignMyNight, we would give you a larger chunk. But everyone, when we exited, had shares in the company, which meant when we sold, everyone got some cash.
Yeah.
And, for someone who had joined 3 months ago, they might have got £3,000 cash. Great. Out of nowhere. And, the ones that have been with us for 7 years could have got, like 100 to 300,000 pounds cash at the end when we sold DesignMyNight. So that was always a big incentive, was, look, trust us, go on this journey with us, and we'll make it hopefully worth your while at the end of it.
Yeah. And I think that nowadays, now we're in 2021, and you see these kind of unicorn startups that around people, it's become a really lucrative and sort of aspirational career, whether you're not founding your own business, but you go and join a sort of high growth startup. What was it? Was that the case when you started, or were you sort of anyone come here? Do you want to work for us? We'll have you.
Yeah, it was very different then. We just looked for just passion, and you could see that when you were interviewing people. I said two of our best hires, I would say, three actually. One in development in tech. He worked out of his bedroom, had never worked at a job before. But my CTO interviewed him and was like, this guy could be a genius. He had a great cultural fit with us. We could see he would get involved and have fun. And he was an absolute mega star for us. And then we had two in customer success who were working in Tesco, stocking shelves. They were young and they were like, actually, I think I want to do customer success. I've never had a job in an office before. But they were the right type of person. You could see they would get on with customers, and they just were honest, genuine, hardworking, and just wanted a career. And those were the people that we loved to find. So yeah, it took a lot of filtering through CVs to find the right type of person. But we never looked at university degree.
Yeah.
We never looked at sort of, CV is half gumph anyway. So, we never really looked at any of that. It was just okay, for us, the important thing was the covering letter. So for anyone listening that wants to work at a startup, we wanted to see with their CV, they sent a letter, or an email that was, this is why I love DesignMyNight. This is how I've used it. This is why I think I would be a great fit for you guys. I've looked at the team on your website and I feel like it would be a great fit for me, just to show that you've actually looked and care, rather than just sending out your CV to 600 people.
Yeah.
And those were the type of people, as I said, didn't care about your background, didn't care about your qualifications. We just wanted people that wanted to work hard.
And wanted to work with you as well, build that same sort of cliche term dream, move towards the same goal. There's obviously a great deal of strength in that, and it helps sort of push a company along if you're not having to sort of mitigate HR disasters at all points. Did you ever have any sort of failures or struggles in that front? So going from the founder to going to be a sort of a manager and running a team? It's
tough. So when we sold DesignMyNight, we had about 100 people. Didn't have HR, even up until the end. So Andrew and I, and sort of our office manager, we were sort of HR. We were good because we were very sensitive to people's needs and requirements. Where that becomes difficult, as you say, is where you have to make difficult choices. We would have people crying in meeting rooms to us, and for various different reasons. And actually, that was the hardest part for me, was the emotional stress. Every day there was something different, and it might be a personal problem for someone. It might be a family problem. It might be a work squabble. There was always something, and they would always want to come to us with it. So, part of the great thing was our open door policy, that we could speak to anyone and wouldn't judge them. And we always felt like we would do the right thing by one of our team members. But the flip side of that is when you're trying to grow and run a business, to like constantly have the weight of 100 people on your shoulders was actually really, really draining. And realizing that when you get to 100 people, unfortunately, not everyone's going to be happy all the time. And I took that quite personally. When you're 10, 20, 30, 40, it really is a family. And I really knew everyone's family, etc. But when you're getting to 100 as the founder, it's, you can't be on that personal level with everyone. And you just have to come to accept that as long as you feel like you're doing the right thing in your company culture, unfortunately, not everyone's going to be happy, which is a tough realization as a founder.
And I think everyone as well, you spend so much of your time at work, there is that kind of overlap between personal life and professional life. And I think now in particular, when people are working from home and people are seeing inside their bedrooms or whatever it is every day, those barriers are really broken down. So how did you do you use any tips or techniques to sort of manage that, being an emotional sponge and feeling quite drained?
I think, personally, it was also like managing my time. So I would have to just, switch off at times, and so, the great thing about Slack, for example, is it's a great, organizational tool, but the negative is you're always on. Whereas email, you can choose to read as and when you want. So for me, it was sort of self-preservation that, I would have to, switch off notifications on Slack and email, on weekends. And, if I was going to take a holiday, is not to take Slack with me. So there was a lot of self-preservation, but Andrew was better than me at that. So he was very good at cutting loose. He also was building a family then as well. Whereas, I that was probably my biggest failing, was taking everything way too personally, and having the weight of them on me. And, when you're that big as a company, you have to have some detachment, unfortunately.
Yeah. And if we speak about failures, if you look on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, anywhere, there's a lot of talk about failure. There's kind of celebration of failure, what we learned from failure. Those kind of aspirational stories of I was here and now I'm here. Look at my Lamborghini. Isn't life great? And I think, there's some useful information out there, but often it's almost fetishized. It becomes a really exciting part of your journey. What's your view on failure? Is it a useful sort of learnings? Should we be celebrating it as much, or should we be saying, that was rubbish, let's move forward?
I sort of go against it. So I use LinkedIn as my main social platform because I like to sort of do a bit more long form education and helping people. I tend to go against the grain of, like, as you say, the new sort of clickbait people. It's two sides to failure. So where I think the UK is very different to the US is, when we're kids, and you're in like a running race, you celebrate coming third. Whereas I think in America, you celebrate when you come first. And I think Brits by our nature are a lot sort of softer in terms of that. That, oh no, it's okay, you'll do better next time, rather than, no, let's do better next time. And this is how we can do better next time. And I think the same is sort of falling into the startup world, where being an entrepreneur is very fashionable and cool. And, I can fail, but I'm going to learn loads of lessons. Like, I think one of our main reasons that we were successful, because Andrew and I didn't have failure as an option. Even in our darkest moments, we knew this business was going to be successful. So, my sort of motto is don't go into business celebrating failure, or or almost hoping for failure, because that's starting me on my road. You should set up a business thinking you're going to succeed and doing everything you can to succeed. If you fail along the journey, which you will, as long as you've learned a few lessons as why you failed or why something went wrong. And we had a few bumps in our road. But we just sat back. We didn't accept that as failure. We thought, okay, how can we make sure this failure never happens again? And then learn from it. I agree. It has been fetishized somewhat, where I'm a bit harsher, where I'm like, no. If I'm investing in a company or if I'm starting a company, I don't want to see failure. unfortunately.
But I think that's really good feedback. And I think it is something that people need to think about. It's like, do you want to fail? Is that going to be your option, or do you want to succeed? And it's finding those ways to mitigate, the failures that will come along the way, so they don't end your business.
Yeah. And sometimes you've got to accept, unfortunately, that, okay, well, maybe the business is going to end. So, like, I'm not saying at all costs that all of your savings, all of your life pour into this business that isn't going to succeed. So you do need some realism as well, and that comes from having the right people around you to actually be like, okay, this hasn't worked, but let's not celebrate that it hasn't worked, but let's not kill ourselves that it hasn't worked. Let's focus on what we can do next and make that a success.
And you talked about the companies you invest in. You're an investor at Horseplay Ventures. You hear pitches the whole time at one of the top business podcasts, PitchDeck Podcast. When you hear from some startups across the sort of whole sort of broad range of spectrum, what are you looking for?
So we see about, at Horseplay, we see about 60 decks a month. We're looking for, so number one is always the founder or founders. So we've turned down really good ideas, but we didn't think the founder or founders were quite right. Didn't have that spark that I was talking about. And you can have the best idea in the world, but if the wrong people are driving it, it will probably fail. So we're looking for that spark and energy from the founders. Whenever I speak to a founder about the industry they're operating in, I want them to be the experts. So I don't want you just to have an idea in the field you're operating in. I want you to have gone away and really become an expert. I want you to be an expert in your competitors. I want you to be an expert on the market. I want you to be an expert on where you think the market's going. And that is just research. So anyone can do that. So I think that's number two. So really understand your market deeply. And then the third one, which sounds very obvious, is make sure you have a legitimate problem you're solving. It's way too easy to think your idea is great, but without then validating it properly. And when I say validate, I don't mean asking friends what they think. I mean reaching out to potential customers, email them, message them on LinkedIn. You'll be surprised. People are quite responsive. And I say try and invalidate your idea before you go ahead with it. So as an example, since Andrew and I have left DesignMyNight, we've had 8 ideas for another business. And we validated one of them, which we're working on at the moment. But we've invalidated 7 other ideas where we might have spent like a month researching it, getting excited about it. But then for whatever reason, we were like, actually, this competitor is too strong, or maybe we don't have the right skill set as founders to take this company on. And it's tough to invalidate an idea when you're so excited about it, but that's super important.
So it's kind of that balance between like commercial reality and passion. So you can be passionate about it, but at the end of the day, it needs to actually deliver and be profitable.
Sell it. People, and that's a big hole that people fall into, is they might build something great, but no one wants it. And you have to do that proof of that validation before you spend your time and money on it.
And do you think it's your time sort of going into those bars, speaking to people, would you buy this? Would you buy this? When you're sort of building DesignMyNight, that makes you so customer centric.
Yeah, that and when we were building the software, we built a panel of bar managers, pub managers, restaurant managers, and would speak to them constantly and just be like, we want your feedback. What could our software do better? And our best ideas came from our customer feedback. And then the customers could see the features we were launching really suited their business. It wasn't from a corporate tower telling them how they should run their bar. It was from bar managers. So, that one suggestion from one bar manager that we would launch to 1,000 bars, all the other bar managers would be like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. So you have to be on the ground. And if you're a B2C company dealing with consumers, speak to them, pick up the phone to them, email them, ask for feedback. If you bury your head in the sand, you'll invariably fail.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the benefit of being a startup, right? Is that like you can actually make those changes that suit your customers, that suit the businesses you're selling to, much, in a much more reactive way than a big corporate that might be your competitor. They can develop that software, but it's going to take them a lot longer, and there's going to be a lot more sort of legislation to go through before they actually get to market.
And that's how we won. So we, on the B2C side, we did it against Time Out, who at the time pivoted back to sort of free magazines. So we knew we could beat them on digital. And then the software, we were up against like OpenTable, who were $1 billion company, BookerTable, who were worth like 600 million euros. But as you say, we just knew that it would take them so long to make significant changes to their software, whereas we were pushing changes live every week. So literally every week there would be a new feature in our software, whether it be a tiny little thing or a whole new product. And our customers just loved us for it. They were like, oh, we made this suggestion a month ago and now it's live. At OpenTable, that would be 3 years. So that really got people on our side as well.
And before we go into the questions, what are you most excited about in that sort of startup world at the moment? I think startups are having a moment. I think they have been for a long time, but I think certainly like right now we're seeing, Rishi Sunak, our Chancellor, is doing a big drive towards entrepreneurship, encouraging startups to scale up, trying to make the UK a more nice, friendly place for startups. We're one of the biggest, I think we've got one of the most active venture capital scenes, biggest investors in the entire world. So what are you excited about in that space?
So yeah, the UK is a great place. And I say UK, it's not just London, to build startups. I'm seeing lots of little hubs come out of Manchester, Bristol, Birmingham, Newcastle, Liverpool. So it's definitely not just London. I think the government could do a lot more, but that could be a topic for another discussion. But I'm just excited that it feels like the startup scene is now a legitimate business option for people. So what I say to young people that might want to start their own business is, okay, maybe instead of going to L'Oreal, for example, why don't you join a startup? And yes, there's risks involved with joining a startup, but get a real sense for working in a startup. And I think there's so many job opportunities where in traditional job sectors there might not be now, like retail. Actually, the startup ecosystem is thriving. So, if you go onto startup job boards, there are startup jobs of all levels now. So I would say, get involved, get working with startups, really understand how it all works. And then if you want to become a founder, you don't even necessarily have to become a founder. That's a great breeding ground for you to see how it works. Yeah, I'm super excited that I hope that it just goes from strength to strength, and Europe is really starting to overtake West Coast America now in terms of funding into pre-seed and seed. A lot of the big VCs from San Fran have now come over to Europe and are starting to invest in early stage European startups, which they never would have done before. So it is a really good, thriving ecosystem. And look, startups are the ones that are going to solve the world's problems.
Absolutely.
They create a lot of the world's problems, social media, but they are also the ones that are going to solve economic crises. They're also going to solve environmental crises. They're also going to solve inequality. And that's the really exciting thing for me, is that all the innovation is not coming from the big corporates or the government. It's coming from startups.
And the big corporates like L'Oreal, I used to work on the Procter Gamble business at a company called WPP, and they buy in their startups. So they buy in the innovation. So those wacky, spicy thinkers are in the startup space, and the big corporates are trying to literally buy them to encourage their innovation.
And a lot of the big corporates have funds now that a lot of people won't realize, or a lot of the big corporates will back accelerators or incubators with their own cash to hopefully unearth. I know L'Oreal do that. So they fund quite a few of the accelerators, only obviously for beauty innovation. But they're sort of gambling some of their money to try and find the next big thing in beauty. And as you say, will eventually buy that company, which is great for everyone.
So just before we go into questions, we actually talk about going to go and work in a startup to learn how to start one. One of our alumni did exactly the same. He graduated with us in sort of 2011. He went to go and work for Sweatcoin, sort of went into a startup as one of the first employees, and then launched his first business. He said actually wearing those hats, understanding how it's run, is like one of the best sort of experiences you can have to understand what it's going to be like when you're a solo founder trying to do everything. And he got his VC funding in December last year.
Nice.
So it works. Good advice. So we've got a question here from Bill. So, what are your thoughts on grad schemes in general? Do you sort of recommend that kind of corporate pathway as the celebrated route post-university?
I would never talk down on that. I think it is very much horses for courses. I think what's changed now is when back in, I think it was 2006, 2007, that was sort of the only route was, if you're going to be successful, you're going to either be like go into medicine or law or a corporate grad scheme. So what's changed now is what we were just discussing is actually you can go and work at a startup. Earn similar salary early stage and just hone your skills in a startup. And don't forget, there's a lot of roles in a startup where you don't need expertise. So customer success, account management, product management, there's you can go in as like a marketing exec, PR exec. There's lots of roles where you don't need to be like dev, where you obviously need your coding skills. So I would say both work. It's really what you want, but what you've got to be careful with going into the corporate world, where I've seen a lot of my friends fail, where they wanted to do a startup, but then got comfortable. And if you are successful in a corporate, your salary can go up quite nicely. And actually, once you're on a higher salary, it's very difficult to then turn your back on that and go back to zero and start a startup. So that's the only thing I would say is if you want to hone your skills in a corporate, absolutely do it. You will learn a lot. But try and put a timeline on yourself, on your own journey, on what, when you want to do your own thing. So maybe go and say, okay, I'm going to work here for 3 years, then I might join a startup, and then hopefully I'll do my own thing.
But I think it's worth saying as well that from my experience, when you go into, I've previously worked in big corporation, the entry salaries for startups and big corporations are often not that difficult. It's just like, not that difficult, they're different.
Yeah.
They are both quite similar.
Nowadays, and you've even got big startups, Google, all of those ones. You still go and work for those to get an idea about the startup scene. It doesn't have to be like a teeny startup. Yeah.
And you talked about how you didn't need that kind of experience, that technical experience, so like DevOps or actually doing the coding.
Yes.
This is another question. There's a lot of noise at the moment about the kind of no code. A lot of kind of no code platforms, and people can just build them quite quickly. If you have no coding experience but you want to kind of have a tech startup, should you be put off?
Well, Andrew and I didn't, so no is the answer. I would advise you either get someone in as your co-founder, probably, who does, if it requires dev. There are some great no-code tools out there at the moment. If your product does require development, if you've got the money, you can go to agencies, but that is notoriously expensive. So I think I would recommend trying to get a co-founder that does have dev experience and getting them along for the journey as well is probably the best way, but definitely don't be put off. No.
And on a lot of those startup job boards, you said, as I mentioned, you can got sort of, they are advertising for co-founders, technical co-founders. There are certain sort of accelerator programs that want someone with an idea to go and basically match make the technical people with the idea creative people.
It's a big scene, like matching co-founders, because if you go to an agency and they'll charge you 40 grand to build a product, which is only version 1, don't forget, that needs to keep improving, versus finding a co-founder which, like you, probably might not take a salary at all for a year, but has the equity, you're saving a lot of money. And agencies, don't really care that much about your own business. Whereas if your dev was a co-founder, they obviously will work night and day on that project with you. So yeah, there's lots of services, as you say, accelerators, incubators. Entrepreneur First is one of the big ones, where actually that is what they do, is they bring people together to create teams, basically.
Yeah. And this is a question from Nick. He said, if you're sort of graduating university but looking to start your own business, is there anything that you wish you knew looking back when you started DesignMyNight? So leaving university but wanting to be an entrepreneur, what do you wish you'd known?
I mean, I'm glad I didn't know, but anyone that's going on that journey, know that is intense. Do not be put off it, because that's half the thrill, but be prepared. Your loved ones won't hear from you. Your family won't hear from you. You will be very stressed. You have to make sure, a big thing if you want to do it straight from university is making sure you've got the personal circumstance to be able to do that. You've got to think, okay, I might not get a salary for a year and a half. How am I going to fund, am I going to live at a parent's house? Am I going to crash at a mate's house? Yeah. But you need to be very aware that you probably won't earn any money for at least a year. So a lot of founders I see fall into that trap, and then their personal circumstance becomes untenable to then carry on the business, which is a huge shame. So do not leave university and think you're just going to raise money instantly to then pay a salary. So make sure you've got everything in place to be comfortable that for at least a year, you can put everything into that business.
And I think there are also some really great companies that invest in university spinouts. It's a huge movement at the moment. So whether you're not an entrepreneur yet, there are those people to kind of go and speak to. There's those networks that are already sort of establishing themselves to encourage that sort of entrepreneurship, and also that are investing in it, supporting in it. So at least if you're going on, all your friends are joining grad schemes, you might at least build connections with people who are doing that same route as you are.
And I think that's important, is like go and be interested. So go and speak to people. Maybe if you've got an idea already in a similar industry, and connect with them on LinkedIn. Go and find advisors, mentors. Most people are more than happy to offer their advice and support. But you've got to, get off your bum and go and do that and look for help, look for advice. And in the startup community, people are very giving with their time. Yeah.
And like you said, it's about the kind of the spark. It's like, be hungry, be proactive, be ambitious.
Yeah.
Like they're the qualities of, an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So start before you started your business.
Get building networks. If you launch a business and you've already got tons of networks, then you're in a much better position.
Yeah. And this is from Rachel. As an investor, are there any specific sectors you're really excited about at the moment or going into the future?
That's a good question. The hot ones at the moment are future of work. So how a business is going to operate if we're not all in the office together. So that's a very hot one at the moment. Health tech is obviously a very big one. Actually, ed tech. So, I think a lot of people are seeing the schooling system is a bit broken. So there's a lot of ed tech coming out at the moment, which is quite exciting. What else? Mobility. So city mobility. I invest in an e-mobility company around scooters and e-bikes, which is doing very well. What else is very hot at the moment?
These are a lot of industries that are sort of tackling the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah. And, investors want to be seen, especially VCs, investing in those projects, but those are the ones that the new generation, so young millennials and Gen Zs, are more interested in as well. Actually, femtech is a huge health, so feminine healthcare, feminine body issues, mental health is huge at the moment as well. I see a lot of decks around femtech, so that's quite a cool space.
And where can people, obviously the PitchDeck podcast, but where can people go and find out about these kind of early stage startups that are bubbling away in that kind of ecosystem?
I think, connect with people on LinkedIn that are founders, investors, advisors, mentors. They should be posting about it. Go and find early stage, but just by Googling it, you'll find lists of like early stage investment companies. And if you look at like Horseplay Ventures website, you'll see our portfolio and the type of things we're investing in, and you'll probably start to see common themes there as well. So just like ingrain yourself in the community. Go to webinars, go to Q&As. There's lots of free resources out there, and just start connecting with people.
And this is a great one from Dan. When you look to invest, other than the intangible spark that you see in founders, what metrics are you looking for to differentiate the opportunity from the 60 others you see each month?
That's a good question. So the metrics is a funny one. So I have invested in sort of pre-product companies. So this is the idea. This is how we're going to build it. We haven't built it. I've also invested in pre-revenue products. So we are 95% done. This is our launch strategy, which we'll do with investment. So it's not necessarily metrics per se of like how many customers, how much revenue. But what I do look in all of them is customer appetite. So I know I've said it a few times, but have you spoken to the customers? And yes, you haven't got the product, but is there an intent to purchase there? So that's really, really important. So it's seeing when we launch that there is a real appetite and that you have spoken to 200 people, not 10 people. All of that qualitative data is important, but don't forget, your valuation will be affected. So when I'm investing pre-revenue, pre-product, it's a much lower valuation than if I'm investing that someone that has traction and has revenue. So again, it depends as a founder how much equity you're willing to give up based on your journey so far.
Well, we're just about to come to time, but we've had some amazing questions. And Nick, you've been an incredibly generous and insightful guest. I think we've learned, go and see your customers, speak to them. You don't know everything. They know more than you. Be gritty and stop fetishizing failure. It happens, but know what you want and work hard for it. And also meet a good co-founder. You only know so much, and another person is going to help you along that journey in an emotional sense, in a supportive sense, and also driving forward for business. So sort of final question to you, as well as a big thank you before we go. If you could look back at your football mag flogging self and sort of give them some advice based on everything that you know now, what would you say?
I would say go on the startup path earlier, like that. You knew that was your passion, but you were sort of suppressing it for sort of social norms. So I don't think the footy, the Football Fanatics magazine was the $1 million idea. I would have told myself to follow that path a lot sooner, rather than doing what you think you should do to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's very, very good advice, and something that we celebrate at the foundation. So get started. Your first idea doesn't need to be your last one, but it sets you on the path to start actually building.
Yeah, 100%. It's so easy nowadays to start with no code tools, with free tools. You can get a website live in a weekend for 25 quid. There's so many options out there to start a business. So people don't really have an excuse now not to. So if you have that passion, if you have that spark, if you've got an idea, just give it a go. Don't put that pressure on yourself that it has to be the $1 million idea, but just start it and see where it goes.
Nick, thank you so much. So you've got the PitchDeck Podcast season 3 is coming out very soon. It's in the registration page. There's a link to that. But where what can people have to look forward to?
So PitchDeck. So someone's ripped off my idea and they have called it PitchDeck Podcast with similar typography as well. So look for PitchDeck with my Yeah, it's already dog eat dog. So yeah, look for PitchDeck with my name on it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And it's basically young and early stage founders pitching to myself and a guest angel. So you'll hear how someone else pitches. We then live Q&A them as an angel investor would. And then the angel and myself discuss the opportunity without the founder there. We've got some of the world's biggest investors on this series. Really excited. I've recorded a few of them already, and some West Coast America, San Fran investors as well. So go and listen to that. It'll be launching in a week or so, but you've got 2 series to binge on if you want to listen to that before. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I do say to people, don't pitch me on LinkedIn, but engage with my content, engage with me. More than happy to do that. And then check out Horseplay Ventures. So that's horseplay.ventures. That's where if you want to pitch an idea, you can pitch it through Horseplay. But there's some free startup tools on there as well. So go on there on the startup tools page and download lots of free information for free. We don't collect data or anything. It's just there to help. And you'll also see all the companies we've invested in. So if the people interested in the types of company we invested in, just take a look at our portfolio there.
Oh, well, Nick, thank you so much. It's always great to speak to people who are like-minded, who are champions of the startup space, and obviously someone who is so successful and doing such incredible things. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll speak soon.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Katie.
Goodbye. Thank you.